Hi, let's talk about the Automate panel. So this is where we can automate the process of building, testing, and rebuilding volumes within your map. The idea being that it's going to get rid of some of the grunt work involved with maintaining volumes and volume integrity in your levels, allowing you to focus on the important things. So the system is built around the concept of depot actors, and these actors are your base camps for each volume in the map. So I have a map here that I want to add a bunch of volumes to. And the idea is that I'm going to add a depot for each area, and it's going to handle the building and testing and rebuilding of each volume associated with it. So let's come down to the first one here, and we're going to create a depot. And as you can see, it's obviously got no volume on it currently. And when you start a depot, it runs a task. Now, if it doesn't have a volume on it, it will send out a builder drone, just as if you'd sent out a build drone from here. And so let's do that now. As usual, it's scanning the area and then generating. Now we have our volume. Now if we select the depot again and we start the selected depot, it's going to send out a testing drone. And it's going to test to see if that particular volume had any problems. And as it turns out, it didn't, naturally, because we just built it. And so it completes its task, and that's the end of its run. And so the idea being that we can add multiple depots into different rooms, and they each handle their respective volumes. So let's start all the depots. Now remember, this one has a volume associated with it, and these two don't here. So this one's testing, and this one's building, and this one's building, and then we're complete. And if we want to, we can run a depot report, and it will tell us what's the status of each of them and what's the last thing the depot did. So what happens if a test fails? We're going to grab this wall here, and we're just going to move it out the way, and then we're going to select our depot, and we'll start it. And what will happen is it will run a tester, and as soon as it reaches a warning or error threshold, it will cancel the tester and rebuild it. Now, it's going to fail this very, very quickly, so we probably won't even really appreciate it much. But here, it's under the validation settings. The same thresholds that are used by the validation system is what drives the potential for a rebuild. So as soon as it hits 5 warnings or any errors, it will rebuild it. So I'm going to start this depot, and immediately it failed it because it detected the errors very quickly, and it's rebuilding the volume. And there we go. We have our new volume that now extends to the end here. So the great thing about the system is that it doesn't delete the volume. Just like a regeneration, it only updates the brush shape. So any changes that you've made to a volume, let's say we've changed the color of this to yellow. Now let's move this wall out of the way here. We're going to select the depot. So if you have the volume selected, you can jump to its associated depot with this button, and it will select its owning depot. We're going to start the depot. It will fail again and rebuild it, but we'll see that the volume will keep its properties. So we'll select depot and then start. So it's failed it, and it's now rebuilding it. And as we can see, the volume has kept its settings. So this isn't a new volume. It's the same volume. If I put a component on here, it will all remain intact. So you are free to add and adjust all of the properties and parameters on your volumes, safe in the knowledge that if the shape needs to be changed, the depot system will handle it, and it will keep the volume actor intact. Now, you may have noticed these little numbers down the bottom here. These are our bookmarks. So these allow us to quickly jump between the different depots. So obviously the depots are going to be associated with rooms in your map, and so they can act as handy teleport points. So if I press 1, it will jump to the first one that I built here, and 2, and 3. And so this will allow us to really quickly navigate around the map, as well as jump to our depots and see what the current status of the depot is. You'll also notice that the icon changes when we have a volume in it, so we can wipe the volume from this depot. When we click that, it will show up confirmation and cancel buttons. We confirm, and now it's deleted the volume. And you can see that the depot lacks colors now, so you get really good feedback here on the status of the depots. I already mentioned about the depot report earlier. If you have depots selected, it will show you a report on the ones you have selected. If you have nothing selected, it will show all of them. So you can get a really good overview of a busy map of the status of all your volumes. So what about really sensitive times during development where you want to be really careful around what's happening with volumes and you don't want automatic rebuilds on your volumes? That's what this checkbox here is for. So in the event that a volume needs rebuilding, this checkbox will determine if it actually goes ahead and rebuilds it. For example, if I move the volume and then restart this, it's failed and it's going to rebuild a new one. But with this disabled, if I move the volume, it's going to have failed. It's found loads of warnings and errors, but it's not actually going to do anything. It's just going to tell you about it. And so again, you can see this in the report and you can get all of the information here. So it's a really helpful way of checking your volumes, but ensuring that nothing actually happens to them as you approach, say, a milestone or something important like that. Obviously, this is a global setting, but if you want to lock specific volumes from the rebuild system, well, that's what the lock button is for. Let's zoom in on this one here. And what we're going to do is we're going to lock it. And you can see that we've got a little lock icon, a little lock text that makes it clear about which ones are locked. And also this shows up in our depot reports here. So if you have any particularly sensitive volumes that you don't want automatically rebuilt, maybe you custom edited them or something like that, you can lock them and know that even with rebuild enabled, that these will not get rebuilt. So if I move this volume out of the way here, so this one will get rebuilt, this one will not because it's good, and this one should, but because it's locked, it won't. So we're going to start. Oh, it did have to get rebuilt because it found some warnings. This one's getting rebuilt because it definitely had warnings in it. And this one failed, but it's just completing tests and not actually doing anything. And then we'll check the depot report, and we can see here that these two got rebuilt, but now they're passing validation, whereas this one failed tests, but it's locked, and so nothing happened. So it should be really clear to you what's happening. You have complete control on both a global and an individual level. So normally when we build or generate a volume, it will use the current settings that we have in Volumator. And so if I regenerate this as a voxel, and I'm going to make the voxel size really large, like this, so far so normal. But if a volume has to get regenerated because the depot failed, then instead of using current settings, it will use the settings that were used to make the volume that it's updating. And the reason for that is because you could have tailored the volumes in all these different rooms in all totally different ways. And when a rebuild happens, it happens automatically. And so you don't want it to just use the current settings. You want it to keep the settings that were used to make the previous one. It's a small difference, but it's just worth keeping in mind. So let's say that we move this volume out of the way here. I'm going to set all my settings back to, say, perimeter and a smaller resolution. Now, when this depot is run, it will fail, but rather than being in perimeter mode, it will be in the mode that the volume is in, and all of the other settings will be the same as the volume was previously. So we can see it's still in voxel mode, even though my current settings are in perimeter. You don't need to worry about this too much. It's more just important that you know that you can rebuild an entire level's worth of depots safe in the knowledge that they will retain their settings. And this is important because it means that you can keep adjusting your settings. You can change the volume however you want here, and know that if the volume has to get rebuilt, it will go through the detection system again, and it will regenerate it using the settings that were used from it. And of course, you can always find out what those settings were by pressing recall settings, and this will work either on the depot or the volume that you have selected. So if we have the depot here, you'll see that it jumps to this. It should be a pretty intuitive system, but it's kind of important that you know how that works so you don't have to worry too much about it. Now, if you don't like the way that works, or you want your rebuilds to be made with current settings, you can change that behavior by going to validation settings, and then change the depot's retain settings button. So in this case here, we've got a depot. I'm going to change it over to voxel mode, regenerate. And so now if this fails, and I change this to perimeter, it won't build perimeter, it will build voxel like this. But if I disable retain settings, move the volume again, and I'll leave it on perimeter, select the depot. Now, when this builds, it will fail, and it will update it with perimeter mode instead. So it's easier to change the behavior there. So as we've seen, depots use drones to build their volumes, but drones aren't always the best tool for the job. And so if you find yourself in situations where you need to use a non-drone system, that's where you can attach an existing volume to a depot. So looking at the space here, let's place a depot here and then start it. It's going to fly off and it's going to fail to build a volume because there's no geometry for it to detect. So instead, I can manually build a volume using vertices only mode. If you want to hear more about that, then you can watch the build video and there'll be a bit of information in there about that. And we're going to add some points. I'm going to add the last point here. And now I can attach this volume to this depot. So first of all, we make sure we have the volume selected, then we have the depot selected, and then we attach volume to depot, and it updates the depot for this volume. Now, of course, when the tester runs, the tester's still going to fly out, and that's going to be a problem. So you might want to put a barrier around it anyway, but it's good to know that you can attach any volume to any depot without problem, and the system will still work. The validation system also works really well with depots. So we have a complicated room here, and it's not going to build particularly well because of the way I have set it up. But with validation enabled, After it's done the detecting, it's built a perfect volume. Now, if we wanted to regenerate this with validation disabled, we can just disable it and then regenerate. You can see it's now failing. And there we go. So the system works really well because it's using the same error and warning threshold as the depot rebuilding system uses. The validation system is really helpful here because it increases the chances that when a depot is tested, that it will come back passing unless something has changed in the map. So the two systems work quite nicely together. The idea is that you can drop depots into every single room in your level, press the Start All Depots button, and then off it goes, and then you can maintain the volumes by just running the depots every now and again, and it should handle everything really well. So in this case, I've got a level with a few depots in it. We have some dotted around the map here. And so we will just start all depots, and off we go. And the system has finished. And of course, we can see the depot report here at any time. And if we want to, we can run the full volume report too as well. So it should provide you with everything you need to maintain your volumes and stay informed as to what's going on.